Welcome to another episode of Balkanomnicon. I'm Jasmin Mujanović, your host and person who talks to you about the thing that you're listening to. Thank you so much for listening to all of the things that you've been listening to related to this podcast. We've had a couple episodes out now. As I said previously, the support and the listenership has been really, really terrific. I'm very, very grateful, as is the entire team at Odgovor.ba, which hosts this production. The last episode obviously featured a conversation between myself and Kenan Efendic, the editor-in-chief of Odgovor. And this week, I will be speaking with the ambassador and chief of mission of the Consulate General of the Republic of Kosovo in Warsaw, my good friend Drilon Gashi, who obviously you can gather from that title, he is in fact the ambassador of Kosovo in Poland. He's a really, really terrific and intelligent human being who has had a very full and exciting professional career. Before joining the Kosovo Diplomatic Service, he had a very pronounced corporate career in the United States, having worked for Deloitte and the World Bank and several other very prominent organizations. And I wanted to talk to him also because he was somebody that I had met a number of years ago in the context of some of our shared interests in U.S. Policy towards the Western Balkans. He was obviously somebody who was very involved with the Kosovar and Albanian diasporas in the United States. We had learned from each other about our respective backgrounds, about Kosovo, about Bosnia, about the region more broadly. We had done some projects together, and I was very interested in seeing Drilon make this transition into the public service of Kosovo because I think it's such an interesting model for what diasporas, not just from the Western Balkans, but more broadly, one of the things that they can do, right, is actually make that, shall we say, full transition back to their countries of origin and really assist with the process of rebuilding these countries, making them functional democracies, making them functional market economies, and all the rest of it. And so, to my mind, Drilon is really a kind of avatar, a real role model for what this maybe looks like. And so I thought it would be interesting for a number of people, both folks from, say, the Bosnian diaspora, the Kosovar diaspora, the Albanian diasporas more broadly, Macedonian, Montenegrin, Serbian, whoever, wherever, at whatever time, in whatever shape, twirling as we go. More seriously, Drilon, as I said, really someone who I have an immense amount of respect for. So I just thought this would be a really interesting conversation and a great opportunity for the two of us to reconnect and talk shop. Our conversation goes a number of places. I do ask him to speak extensively about his background and how he came to the decision to join the diplomatic service, what that has been like, what that has been like in the specific context of Poland, some of the similarities between Kosovo's and Poland's, shall we say, modern history over the past 30 or 40 years or so. And of course, then we have a little bit of a concluding conversation about some of the outstanding issues related to a handful of the, as he calls them, future recognizers of Kosovo within the European Union, the relationship with Belgrade, and related matters. So I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, Ambassador Drilon Gashi. All right, folks, I am here with His Excellency, I'm going to go ahead and say that, right? I can say that. The Ambassador of the Republic of Kosovo to Poland, Ambassador Drilon Gashi. Drilon, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, dear Jasmin. Dr. Mujanović,
this is really
I should say.
Well, there you go. There we go. Now we're being very formal. So I'll let the cat out of the bag. I mean, I think I'll probably have mentioned this in the intro already. You and I have known each other for a number of years. Dare I say we are friends. I was really, really pleased a number of years ago when you had reached out to me and told me that you were considering joining the Kosovo diplomatic service, and we had a conversation about what that might mean for you personally, and what that might mean for your family, and some of the potential problems and gains and all the rest of it. And it seems like from the outside it has turned out wonderfully for you. Is that a more or less accurate assessment?
It's a kind assessment for sure. Well, first of all, I very much appreciate our friendship and our collective advocacy. I think not only for our countries, but also for the values we both believe in. And so it's great when you get along with someone and you have a personal connection, but that is supported by the professional and the value-based connection, and interest-based, I think, as well, in a good way. I have to say, Jasmin, I feel every day that it's an incredible privilege that I get to serve in this role, get to serve Kosovo. I mean, I'm kind of, for anybody listening who's in our position or who's in the diaspora community, who dreams for a way to have a positive contribution on their country. This has really allowed me to try to do that to the best of my ability, and I've had a lot of fun doing it, and doing it in Poland as well has been great, and I've loved engaging here with institutions, on cultural organizations, representatives, and the like. And it's worked for the family because we're trying to experience the best of it together. So it does make for kind of a rich life in terms of experiences and exposure. And so my wife and I are both grateful for that part of it as well. And then my kids have made a easy transition. It helps, I think, that they're a bit younger, but overall, no, I'm happy that it's gone well, and hoping that it continues to go well.
Fantastic. Well, that's actually have a lot more questions about that, but I feel like I need to ask something else before we go very much further, which is that you and I are now talking on March 27th. And of course, March 26th last night was a big day in the world of soccer/football, depending on which phrasing you prefer. And Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo had terrific nights last night. Both have made it through to the second and final round of the FIFA World Cup playoffs. Unfortunately, Albania did not make it through. But it's a terrific night for fans in Kosovo, fans in Bosnia and their respective diasporas. But I feel like it's a particularly a special night for Kosovo because this is really a historic achievement for what is still a very young footballing side. I mean, it's only been about 9 or 10 years, right, that Kosovo has been playing in international competition. Tell us a little bit about, I mean, both as a fan, obviously, what last night felt like, but also I think some of the maybe like symbolic and cultural aspects of seeing your country play on the international stage. What does that mean for your country and for your people?
It has a immensely important meaning. Last night was a combination of pride in the success of a great team, but it was also a lot of emotion. So as you said, this is 9 years into being a member of FIFA and UEFA, where have a real shot at qualifying for the World Cup, and are cautiously but ferociously optimistic at the same time that we'll get there after the next game. And but it also always reminds us, and I think kudos to our football federation who did a good job. We've had us and Bosnia shared this. We've had an extremely difficult last 30, 40 years, and that's seen through all pores of society, and it's seen through sport, where folks struggled firstly to be safe and be able to play in any kind of sport, but then to have the conditions to compete with these teams in Europe and abroad who have much different capacities, much different support. And so this it's a great underdog story, I think, in both of our cases, and in Kosovo's case, I think we all went through that emotions, and there's an awesome video that's circulating of a sports commentator who's doing his job that night, commentating another game, but he's watching, on another screen, he's watching the Kosovo game, and the emotions he goes through were sort of, represented those of our nation and country looking on last night. So it was really special, and it's a great group of players as well, not only technically on the field, but they also, many of which have grown up abroad, some of which have been born abroad, and they went back. And so the theme song of the team has actually been about, going back home and contributing. And so it's tying together, I think, all of what it means to be Kosovo, and that's a lot coming from the country, but it's a lot, of course, from abroad as well. And so, kind of coming together in the best possible way. So we're confident for this next game on March 31st against Turkey. It's in Pristina. It's at home at Fadil Vokre Stadium, and it's great that it's at Fadil Vokre Stadium because we're going to talk in this podcast about diplomacy and we had this legendary player and then football federation president who navigated getting us membership. And I think not enough has been said about the great ability he had in doing that and the example perhaps that all of us should follow. So it would be a great also an ode to him and his great contribution to at home at the stadium named after him to get to get there, to get to the World Cup qualification. I think we will. So I very much hope we will. I'll be even more emotional, and I'll also save some emotions for our friends Bosnia who will be playing against Italy that day.
Indeed. Well, I think both of them will have their work cut out for them, but certainly hoping for the best outcome for both sides. I will say, it's quite apropos. You have these, I think, lovely and to me, I say also very familiar comments, right, about the role of the diaspora players who in many cases not just sort of made their name abroad, but in many cases were in fact born abroad, but who continue to still sort of maintain, obviously, cultural, familial relationships with their respective home countries or homelands, I should say. I mean, they have their own home countries as well. I mean, we embrace multiple identities and all of that good stuff, right? But I want to kind of loop a little bit back around to you. Your family, as I understand it, based on some of our previous conversations, ends up in the United States. You obviously then go on to have a very, very successful career. You end up working in the World Bank, at Deloitte. You're a very, very successful professional. And then eventually you make this transition into the public service of the Republic of Kosovo. Tell us a little bit just about, what is that initial transition to the United States for your family like in the context of everything that's happening at that time in the Balkans, in the former Yugoslavia, and then, how do you get to the point as an adult where you're thinking to yourself, okay, I think I want to make this transition from a very successful private career into, realistically, I think, a difficult transition that has all kinds of potential pitfalls associated with it. What is happening, in that short chunk of, let's say, 20, 30 years? And if you could just give us the soundbite.
Yeah, it's great. I have a really short, 5-sentence soundbite for that. No.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words. And it's greatly appreciated, especially coming from you. Firstly, my family migrated to the U.S. in the early 90s. Part of the sort of repression campaign of Yugoslavia and Serbia towards Kosovo Albanians at the time was to essentially to fire all Albanians working in public sector jobs or working in certain related professions. And so my father was a journalist at the Radio Television of Pristina. My mother was in a legal office in this public entity in the town we were living in. And they were both put out of work. And my father had been an exchange student in the U.S. earlier. And I think he, unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to discuss this enough with him, but he I think he believed that he can be a really effective journalist and advocate for his country from the U.S. first and foremost. And so it was that sort of foresight that he had to want to relocate us there. And so he came a few years before us, and then was able to win the green card lottery. So we had that great fate. And then we moved to the U.S. and lived in a combination of Bronx, New York, where we have a big community, eventually the suburban New Jersey area around New York City, and then professionally I would go on to live in Washington for some time. And so for the family, it was, we went from this setting where we were amongst most of our family in Kosovo, and then we were, we were the only ones in the U.S. Had no other uncles or aunts or anything like that, no grandparents nearby. So, I mean, sort of a bit of a lonely experience in that side. And then we had our father, who was, doing all he could professionally, I think, to advocate for Kosovo, to be a voice of reason and a voice of hope, more than anything, for folks back home who thought that there would be no better days. It was only the situation was getting worse, and so that was our situation, and we started out with certainly very modest beginnings, but I'm grateful for both of my parents for working hard and creating the best life for us that they could in the U.S. and being able to do that within a generation is not easy. And so, that's an amazing credit to them. And then really focusing on schooling as well and trying to get us into the best school districts in the area. And this sort of explained the later move we made to suburban New Jersey. And, I think about I have two young children, and I think about obviously creating a good life for them whilst trying to do what I would like to do, professionally, and let's say for my country. It's not easy, but they I think they did it in a quite effective way whilst doing so in a society that they hadn't grown up in. And so it was, they were obviously transitioning in many ways. They were far from their networks. They were far from their family members. And to tie that back to Kosovo, while we had lived abroad, we had we came back once in 1995 for an uncle's wedding in Kosovo. But even that visit was interesting because my mother was interviewed by the police service, and they were asking about the whereabouts of my father, who was a big propagandist in the U.S., who was working against the interests of the state. And so, as a kid, I feel like I don't know that I could sit down and, make a political analysis about this at that day, but, you could feel the pressure of, the times we were living in, and even trying to have this, at least familial connection with our country of origin, which was made more difficult. And so, of course, then, during the war in Kosovo, which, it was, you saw, of course, the unfortunate genocide and ethnic cleansing that you saw in Bosnia, not to the extent of Bosnia. And, there was action taken earlier to support the flight of Kosovo Albanians because of, in many ways, what had happened to innocent Bosniaks. And so during the war, we had refugees from our family members come to live with us. I remember I was, tried to be as proactive as possible then. I was in middle school and I was trying to sort of organize this drive, and I had a great history teacher who, when I told her that refugees were our family members who were war refugees would come, so we got to do a drive, and we got to, and so I remember driving a truck full of things with like a big sort of box for each family member. It's kind of like a startup guide to your new life in the U.S. And so that was a formative experience. My family members went on to kind of integrate themselves and become a part of the U.S. My father went back to work for the UN mission in Kosovo after the war. And so this was difficult from a family perspective because we had been away for, he was living in Kosovo for, the 4 years in the mission, would come back, of course, intermittently. We would spend all summers there. And so I think a lot of these decisions, shaped how close we became to the country. And I remember I took part in the Summer University of Pristina, which was, I was making friends who were my age outside of family, which meant a lot. And so, established a unique connection. And it happened that, when I was graduating from college, it was the year 2008. It was the year that Kosovo became independent. So I was, as many of us in our communities we try to do the best we can in school to have great opportunities, make our parents proud. And when I would speak to my father, my mother, or others about what I wanted to do professionally, I said, well, I kind of want to go back to Kosovo and see if I can play some sort of role in the new country. And so I had the great opportunity to do that, and I spent some time. I started out with internships, and then that ended up being sort of a interpreter and speechwriter for the Prime Minister at the time, Hashim Thaçi. So my father got me this book, which was like this guy who had started off as an intern and become advisor to the Prime Minister in Israel. He says, so, there's a precedent for what's happening here. That was a great experience. And to kind of tie it all back, or to kind of summarize, Jasmin, I'd been there for 2 years, and I said, wow, I love this. I love having this chance, this opportunity to have some sort of a small role in this momentous time for my country. But then I thought, I grew up in the U.S. and I have great opportunities to further develop myself there professionally. And if I really want to do something meaningful for my country, I think I want to go back and work and learn and get global experience, and then think about contributing again in an even more meaningful way. And so this kind of vision I had as a 23, 24-year-old, I was thinking back, I knew some things, or at least it was so I had thought about that when I was in Washington and working with the World Bank and the private sector. I was, certainly fulfilled professionally. Washington's a great place to live. There are many, people from all over the world, people who are, it's a great community of folks to be around professionally, personally, and otherwise. But, I'd always thought I'm trying to do a lot and trying to advocate for back home. And I thought maybe at some point it would be great to make the transition, make that my full, make it not only the side gig that I was trying to do, or finding time each week to advocate in some way for Kosovo. I thought maybe I would it would be even more meaningful for my life, for my profession, if I committed fully. And then I had stepped up my advocacy efforts because it made me feel complete, in a way. It gave me things that my profession maybe didn't do. But I thought, well, if I want to continue to have an influence in the way my country moves forward, I ought to form a platform so that folks know who I am, and I could over time build a voice, and then use that voice for the benefit of my country, and eventually that led to obviously the great honor and privilege of being asked to serve Kosovo. And I'm very honored to have been offered to do so, and happy that I took the decision.
So there's a lot in there that I find quite striking and also very familiar, obviously, in terms of, I think, the different experiences of our respective diasporas. In particular, I feel like this push-pull between, your individual sense of belonging, then the desire, but also basic need to survive and make a living. Both, I think, for us, I mean, you and I are more or less of a generation, as well as our parents. And, my parents also were, white collar professionals who then became janitors and all the rest of it, because that's what you needed to put food on the table. And there was absolutely no shame associated with that, because it was what was required to feed your family. And as you said, to, make your way in a new country. I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit more, though, on one particular aspect, which I feel like is sort of, shall we say, pregnant in a lot of your comments, but I didn't hear it explicitly. And it's something I think a lot about, but I would love to hear your sort of thoughts on it. I know that the Albanian language is a very important part of Albanian identity writ large, not least of all because the community as a whole, the nation, if I can say so, as a whole, has these different confessional traditions that are all considered part of a singular whole. And a big part of maintaining that whole, whether it's in Kosovo, whether it's in Albania, whether it's Montenegro, North Macedonia, whatever, and of course the broader international community, the broader diaspora, is the language. What was your experience like as a young person trying to maintain the language? Was it maintained at home? Did you struggle with it? And perhaps what is even your thinking about it now with your kids, who, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me, were born in the United States. They're in Poland now, presumably attempting to also learn some Polish. What has been the role in thinking about language in your own family and for yourself personally?
I appreciate the question. I mean, language is so critical to one's sense of belonging. It's critical to also understanding your culture, to being able to communicate, and yeah, get to the real nuances, the deep, kind of exchange between people and between the broader society. So we had this sort of rule in our house. Our parents had this rule that my mom spoke to us exclusively in Albanian. And I'm incredibly grateful that she did that. Our dad, I think, would do about 50-50. So he wanted to speak to us in English so that, we can talk to him about what we were studying in school, and we can kind of have these, let's say, more intelligent conversations. But he wanted to also press us in terms of the Albanian language. What made a huge difference for us, I think, was first having that clear rule, knowing that, with our mom, we had to communicate in Albanian, not because she couldn't speak English, but because she communicated with us in Albanian. That was what we understood. That helped a lot. And then, although we were amongst Albanian American communities or communities from Kosovo, at the same time we spoke mostly English to one another, as happens when you live abroad. But speaking at home with mom, and then particularly going to visit Kosovo over the summer and spending extensive time. We spent 2 months, especially during that time that my father was working there. That helped immensely. For me as well, I remember going to the summer university and doing something sort of productive and professional helped immensely. So much so that, I had this kind of anecdotal thing where I would make friends at the summer university and maintain, communication on instant messenger of the time, AIM, and this is foreign. ICQ, yeah, foreign to concept maybe to younger people today, but it's like the modern social media. And I would, be like, hey mom, how do you write this? Mom, how do you say? And I'd go to my mom and I'd be, is this right? And she would, because I wanted to be precise. And we had this kind of
nothing like getting your mom involved in flirting with someone Mom, on the internet,
hypothetically,
right?
Yeah. If I were writing to somebody I like, would I say this initially? No. So that was helpful, especially for the flirting. No. The other part of that was, it was interesting, when I did make friends, and this was a big part of helping with the language when I was a bit older, the way that folks were writing was super informal, and as people do tend to do. And so I kind of made, for me, that was my time to write and speak in Albanian. So I was super formal because I wanted to really perfect the language I spoke and wrote with. And so that helped, and I kind of maintained that sort of discipline that, well, maybe it's the nature is that you say, FLM for Faleminderit, like very short, but I would say Faleminderit, I would write it out. And so I think those were all the ways that helped with language. And then it was critical to me being able to read media and then things that were written back home, reading books in Albanian, and sort of just making it a much deeper connection that would be beyond the familial connection. I think when you live in diaspora communities and you have a connection to back home, it's usually familial. It's usually around, big family events or going to visit folks that are living back home. But I think when you expand that to other areas, then it becomes more interesting. Then you actually become, I think, a fuller person. And, you can do what you wish. You can use that to just know a bit more about back home and still be living and doing what you're doing where you are. Or it can be, sort of the first step to a deeper connection and exchange, going back and all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, finally, I think we can turn to the question of your, shall we say, current professional obligations. You've been in Poland, in Warsaw, for about 2 years or so, give or take. And in that time, if I recall correctly, I mean, the actual mission has gone through a not insignificant transformation. So tell us just a little bit sort of what you encounter when you first kind of get to Poland. What is your assignment, as it were, in so much as you can tell us, obviously, and then how does that actually evolve, and sort of what do you understand to be your priorities, and what are you trying to accomplish in the shall we say the second half of your mandate?
Maybe I'll begin and just say when I was approached to serve. Of course, again, it was and it is a great honor and privilege. And then I had a bit of a say or a bit of exchange of opinions on where. And I had wanted to serve in Poland because I thought it was, and it is, or maybe that's hopefully changing now. It was the most significant European country with which we had the least significant relationship. So Poland is kind of in a unique position within the EU vis-a-vis us, because we have 21 countries that recognize our independence and with which we have full diplomatic relations. We have Poland, where we had recognition very early on, which we're very grateful for, but we didn't have the establishment of any bilateral ties until 2022, where consular relations were established. And then, of course, we have 5 countries in the EU where we don't yet have recognition, but there we have varying degrees of cooperation nonetheless, and hoping, of course, that they'll expand. And so with Poland, I saw it as I had the opportunity to start, establish, or found the mission. So an incredible privilege and an incredible sort of curiosity for me in terms of foreign policy. Create a first impression, and also try to I have come. Of course, with the number one priority to do all that I can to illuminate why this relationship deserves to be that at a full diplomatic level of full diplomatic relations. And so all those, really motivated me to pursue the particular experience. And I remember when I started, I mean, just very practically now, the building, so the one I'm in currently, our consulate general. So we have consular relations. So I am an ambassador leading a consulate general. So my rank basically, is a way to state that our hope is to do much more. And I have, the trust of my president. And I went through this process of confirmation by all institutions to really expand the level of ties here and have them be quite intensive. But, for the currently, we're the only professional consulate general in Warsaw, which for those who are following, who may not be from the diplomatic realm, typically embassies are in national capitals, and consulates are usually the second mission, which can be in other, important areas. So those are some of the specifics, let's say, of the nature of the mission. But when I arrived, my colleagues before me had selected the space. So I did have a office space, but there was no furniture. And I also had to register, get the office registered and the mission and everything. So I remember I asked the property management company, I said, may I have a desk, a chair, and access to the internet immediately, if that's possible. And I'll take it from there. And so, bit by bit, we sort of got the mission registered and did all of those, let's say, specific activities that you do when you're first creating a mission in the country. And then we were able to fully consolidate it that first year. So the first sort of year was being active and going through the typical motions. So, of course, meet and develop relationships with national level institutions, get to meet your colleagues in the diplomatic corps and kind of see what you can work on together with them. Stay in touch, of course, with your allies who have their missions here as well. And then, because of the fact that we didn't have a presence before, and because of the fact that we had this sort of more early stage in our diplomatic relations, it was about, yes, founding and establishing the mission, and it was about looking for establishing really what I've termed, a foundation. I hope to create a very solid foundation, and then work towards not only bilateral relations at the level of diplomatic relations, but I think a special relationship. Because what I've found here is that although we didn't have that level of cooperation, there was every reason for that to be the case from both sides. I would say certainly from the Kosovar perspective, but I think also from the Polish perspective. And it's been, a real mission of uncovering that, showing where the commonalities are in politics and defense policy and in common policy views on European international issues, celebrating the already strong economic ties we have with Poland. So they're currently the 8th largest trading partner for us, 4th largest in the EU. And then culture has been a very important area of my focus. One, because I've found that it's something I love that I didn't have enough exposure to in previous professions. But in terms of public diplomacy, really getting a chance to show Poland what we're about and who we are, it's been a great enjoyment for me to be able to do that through culture. And that's allowed me to reach broad audiences, influential audiences, to have that critical exchange happening. And then also, have it work both ways. So, of course, my mission is to represent and promote Kosovo in the best possible way in Poland. But I'm also actually just as interested in my country being much more aware of Poland. And so also promoting Poland and promoting the importance of this relationship back home. Not that that's not clear, but the lack of official relations and exchanges limits that. So I'm investing, let's say, in both directions, so as to support the common product of ties. So I think the first 2 years really have been about establishing relationships, being out there and present and active to make an impact on public diplomacy. And now, I want to sort of formalize this connection more. So have that be translated into memoranda and bilateral agreements, partnerships at the city level, partnerships between academic institutions, cultural institutions, and essentially, do all that I can so that enough connections are made where these continue and are strong in the future. And then my successor, can just sort of continue to enhance those, and he or she can also see, other ways for enhancing ties as well. I, of course, I hope to have, the great privilege of being here to enhance ties to diplomatic relations, and I'll do everything I can to do that. But, whilst, begrudgingly so, I recognize that, diplomacy has impacts that, take time to happen. And so if I don't have that great privilege, then I will set a foundation and make that, something that's very possible for the person who comes after me to do. And so that there's a succession of, positive ties between Kosovo and Poland that I'm able to set up for success.
No, I mean, I think that's obviously so important. Leaving behind functional institutions, right? I mean, that's especially for a young democracy like Kosovo. But I think it's also, it struck me as you were speaking that, me knowing you the way that I do, and what a thoughtful person you are. I wonder, you know, if your country could have chosen a better person for this posting, and I kind of doubt it, given Poland's own incredible trajectory since communism, that it goes from this country that is obviously dominated and oppressed, functionally resecures its independence, and now by all of the metrics is expected to become possibly the largest continental economy within the next decade or two, if obviously the current sort of estimates hold. But it's either way, it's right up there already. It's become this kind of enormous success story. And then also obviously you use the word defense cooperation or the defense policy. And I know that there's been some important developments on that front in Kosovo, obviously, both in terms of the sort of institutional evolution of the Kosovo Security Force, but also some of the recent investment that your government has been making, I believe in particular in terms of drone technology and your drone program. And then, Poland obviously being unfortunately so close to the ongoing aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation. I would think also that is something at you talk about culture, like there is I would think, a kind of a cultural similarity in the pure, shall we say, ambition with which Poles have reconstituted their country, and the way in which I think Kosovans have done with their own country. I mean, much to my chagrin, I should say, oftentimes when I think about some of the similarities and differences between folks in Bosnia and folks in Kosovo, I mean, I think the biggest one to my mind has been, and there's all kinds of complex historical and sociological reasons, yada, 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 that we don't need to go into. But I do think one of the remarkable qualities about folks in Kosovo, both in the diaspora and in the country itself, is like there is kind of ambition seeping out of your pores. And I wonder if that's also something that you've sort of felt, and perhaps your hosts have also recognized in you and in your team.
It's so great to have this conversation with you in particular, Jasmin, for the reason that for everything you and I have worked on and engaged on together and advocating, that our countries are ever closer to NATO and to the EU, and, out there about having this, clear Western-oriented focus, and then understanding that, the integration of our region is as much a strategic move for the EU as it is a practical benefit for our countries. Poland espouses all of those positions. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful for, Poland's merit-based assistance for countries throughout our region, including Kosovo and Bosnia. And actually, interestingly enough, during COVID, Poland had offered vaccine donations to Bosnia and Kosovo in particular, which I think is quite symbolically important. It was Poland last year that also supported this very important resolution on the Srebrenica genocide and the Bosnian genocide, which I appreciated. Also Poland had extended sanctions on the travel of Milorad Dodik to its territory. So, really taking merit-based and proactive positions, and I feel that in our bilateral relations as well. And so I think we've found that we have an immensely productive relationship, and then we're pursuing that more and more. And I haven't felt for one day limited by the fact that we don't have full diplomatic relations. Now, that may just be because of the ambition, seeping from my pores, and my hope and my, work and encouragement to work across all areas. But I need partners to do that, right? I can't do that alone. And I have found so many willing people and partners, and so many open-minded and thoughtful individuals who, as Poland makes this incredible progression and success. I've been happy to be here, by the way, to celebrate it along with our Polish hosts and friends. This, of course, has implications in terms of Poland's enhanced presence and role in the world and in regions like our own. And so I think that there's a willingness also on the Polish side to explore what that means. How do we get even more involved in places like Kosovo and Bosnia? And so I'm appreciative of the fact that they're considering that, and then we're considering that in our bilateral ties. And we, as Kosovo, we certainly can learn a ton from Poland, and we're trying to learn a lot as well from their experience. I've said to our Polish hosts that we don't share a pan-Slavism with Poland, but we share a pan-independentism, which doesn't sound that catchy. But
we're going to workshop that name.
But it means a lot. I mean, Poland is a country that had its independence taken away for 123 years through the partitions of its country, regained it right around the time that we were looking for our own self-determination as Kosovo. Unfortunately, we weren't able to gain it at that time. But our timeline aligned to when Poland regained its independence again after defeating this influence of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, and with its Solidarność and solidarity movement, which was an inspiration for us. And that period for us, which was very important in terms of, first and foremost, and something I think something I try to talk about in Poland, because it's not perhaps something we've emphasized enough here elsewhere in the world. Yes, we did have a war for independence in 1988, 1999, but we had made every attempt to achieve the goals of our country through peace and through peaceful non-resistance. And, one of the fathers of our independence was President Ibrahim Rugova, who, I think was incredibly influential in terms of creating an empathy and a sympathy for our cause abroad that allowed nations to take an interest in our plight and be able then to make very important decisions like, we're just a few days from the NATO humanitarian intervention on behalf of Kosovo Albanians. I don't think if they didn't know that we were a peace-loving people and that we had tried to avoid conflict of all costs, I don't know that they would have really, been aware of our plight and had a view into the fact that, there were mass human rights violations. And this was a time where the West really had to act to stop somebody who, Slobodan Milošević, who had done what he had done in Bosnia and in Srebrenica and in Croatia and elsewhere in the region before. So this was, I think, very important. And I also say the other thing, of course, which is important for us, that we did have a liberation war, and we did have to show that we're willing to fight and die for our independence, and we did that. And so our other father of independence, Adem Yashari, was, incredibly motivational in, the stand he took and the personal risk and the family risk, unfortunately, tragically, that he took in starting this armed liberation movement. But again, it's a story of a few brave souls who felt that they should have, or they can have a role in changing the course of the history of their countries, and they do something that, inspires a whole country then to follow suit and to sort of defend themselves in the first right, but work to, even through means of war when it's necessary, achieve freedom and independence. And so, Poland is very aware of how costly that personal and national plight is. And so we found, extreme commonalities there. And so we're the much smaller country in the equation. Poland is a country of 40 million. You mentioned, its economic success, now a member of the G20 in terms of economic achievement. We are a country of 2 million. We have a dynamic, ICT-based economy. We're enhancing exports and creating new opportunities for investment. But we're the much smaller party in the equation. And so, I'm, trying to go to great lengths to really show what we're all about, and then build on these ties. Really see how we can learn from Poland, and then help be a small part of its continued success economically, politically, and so on, and identify even more routes for our relationship to be productive and a point of pride, a point of celebration. Hey, this is a country that's trying to do what we did. They care a lot about it on the football pitch, in the boardroom, in the parliament, and so maybe we should take an interest, and maybe we can kind of give them that help, because we understand that process and plight maybe better than anybody in Europe, and maybe in the world as well.
Right. So I want to, I want to be cognizant of our time here, and we only probably have about 5-ish minutes or so. But I obviously feel like I have to ask you about one major question, one major aspect of Kosovo's international status, or rather your international relations. I think, you and I were talking a little bit before we sort of started recording. And as you said, obviously, Poland is a recognizer, but we do have these 5 states within the EU who are non-recognizers. And of course, then we have the issue of the so-called dialogue with the government in Belgrade. I'm not sort of asking you to give me the official line one way or another. Oh, you're cutting out for a moment. No, but I mean, I think one of the obvious issues to my mind, and I'm speaking, obviously in my own voice here, is that, okay, the dialogue is one thing, but the 5 non-recognizers are actually a separate thing. And I actually kind of reject the idea that those are related issues, because the decisions of whether it's Spain, whether it's Slovakia, etc., to recognize or non-recognize Kosovo, or any other country for that matter, is a sovereign decision of those governments. Is that something of a conversation point for you when you're talking to perhaps some of your other colleagues in their own respective diplomatic services in Warsaw? Would you agree with that assessment? Would you disagree with it? What is your thinking on this matter?
I mean, it certainly, it's critical for us to expand and make, full the countries within the EU that recognize Kosovo's independence. I refer to the countries that haven't yet done so as not yet recognizers, or future recognizers rather than non. But I think, firstly, there is a degree of communication and exchanges with these countries that perhaps is not reflected in the fact that we don't have an official relationship yet. So, for example, in Greece, we have a resident mission in Athens. With all of these countries, we enjoy visa liberalization, as we do with all the EU countries. They have also all in the past supported a stabilization association agreement that really helped us get on the path to EU integration. So there's some certainly some progress there, but we continue to work really hard to extend the hand of cooperation to all these countries, to really showcase as well that we have benefits we can pursue in economic ties and cultural ties and political and defense ties with them as well. And we hope to explore those further, and we hope to work in the interim, in any ways that we can, so that we build the trust and the relationship necessary to pursue that. In terms of the reasons cited not to recognize, there are arguments made about international law, which I often respond that we have went through all the instances of actually looking into that and found that Kosovo's independence was fully in line with international law. This was a clear verdict given by the International Court of Justice, by an institution that doesn't typically give clear verdicts because of its nature. And so I think it's clear on that front. And in terms of the other worry about portions of these countries or communities in these countries wanting some sort of separation or independence, we emphasize that our independence is a part of the violent dissolution of the former Yugoslavia. So we are one of the federal units that has come out and become independent like all of the others. So it's a specific political process. Obviously, we talked about in this podcast the mass human rights violations and ethnic cleansing and genocide, very specific experiences of our own that really can't be replicated. And the other thing is we haven't extended in any way this cooperation to subsectors of any of the countries that have not yet recognized it. So we're looking to work with the capitals in Bucharest, in Madrid, in Nicosia, all across the capitals of the countries that don't yet recognize this in order to pursue relations in the future. And I very much hope we get there. You made a very important distinction between, countries that haven't yet recognized us doing so and the dialogue process. We are committed, Jasmin, as you know, to continuing the process for dialogue and normalization with Serbia. We hope that to be, a fair process with joint implementation of agreements we have reached in the past. But we hope it also to be, productive and unlock the capabilities of both countries to be members of the EU should they wish to do so. For us, that decision is extremely clear. 97% of Kosovars are in favor of EU and NATO integration. And so the countries that haven't yet recognized us doing so as soon as possible only helps the dialogue process. If you think about one coming before the other, it's certainly the additional recognitions first, because then we are dialoguing on a completely equal footing, which we cannot say now. One, because we have, Serbia is a slightly bigger country than us, has obviously a bigger military and economy, although, as I said, we are ambitious. So, we may be smaller, but we are looking to grow and become strong nonetheless, not to be a threat to anyone actually, but just to be, stronger in our own right. But, us having full recognition within the EU would really give us a clear path to joining the EU, which is very important for us. But also it would really show for Belgrade, or emphasize in yet another way, that the dialogue shouldn't be a process to try to undo Kosovo's independence or territorial integrity or the effectiveness of its institutions. It should be a process to truly normalize relations, agree on having a working relationship as neighbors, which will be forever, and constructively work through that relationship in the future. And so we hope to have good momentum now with the new government of Prime Minister Kurti that was confirmed to really re-engage with our European partners on EU integration, and also work on and hopefully achieve within this mandate recognition by a few of these countries. And I'll bring it back to the Balkans with a final point is, unfortunately the Balkans are referred to pejoratively often, Balkanization and countries that can't get along. But in terms of recognition, we have a great Balkan case study. Montenegro and North Macedonia recognized our independence simultaneously, agreed to do so in concert so as to manage the blowback by Serbia on both of those countries. Now, was there a negative response by Serbia? Yes, there was. Did it pass? Yes, it did. In about a year and a half after North Macedonia and Montenegro recognized our independence, it facilitated obviously very, better, even better relations between our countries with two of those neighbors. But, Serbia essentially moved on. And so for these countries as well, I don't think there's an international law. I'm very, very confident there's not an international law issue. I'm very confident there's not an issue with some other portion of any of those countries that pursues some sort of separation. There's no commonalities, no equivalencies there. And lastly, Serbia will move on, and actually that will be more productive to, I think, Serbia's position in the EU and the world if it, focuses fully on its own development, its own aspirations, and has normal relations with all of its neighbors, including Kosovo.
And I mean, I think from my end, putting on my academic hat here, I do feel like it's also important to stress in this context, and obviously I'm sure you do when especially when you're trying to familiarize people with the history of Kosovo and sort of the dissolution of Yugoslavia. Kosovo's relationship with Montenegro and North Macedonia also had difficult moments in its quite recent history. I mean, Montenegro was effectively party to the events in 98, 99, and nevertheless, the relationship has since evolved, changed, and in some ways, I think as much for Kosovo as for actually Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro has been the real shining example of how much is possible, both in terms of diplomatic relations between the two countries. I mean, in the case of Bosnia, Montenegro is probably its quote-unquote best neighbor because there's no real outstanding issues with it. But I think also for both Kosovo and Bosnia, the fact that Montenegro demonstrates that it's possible to have a very functional and successful multi-ethnic democracy where you don't need to have all these convoluted provisos for quotas and ethnically constituted territories and all the rest of it. To your point, Balkanization is a pejorative term, but actually we can find many positive examples within the region of very successful democracies, multi-ethnic democracies on their way to the EU, already in NATO in the case of both North Macedonia and Montenegro, and so on and so forth, right? Drilon, we have talked for just about an hour. It has been really, really terrific. I'm very, very grateful for the generosity of your answers, really giving us a keen insight into your thinking, your professional and personal evolution. I mean, I'm a huge dork, so I'm like fascinated to hear about, what is it like to be an ambassador? Tell us. Do you like the little cocktail weenies?
Love those. That's the
love those. Love those. Thank you very, very much for your time. This episode hopefully will be out shortly, and hopefully at some point, maybe in a few months or at some other point, maybe we'll have you back and we'll hear about maybe your next posting.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I'll just say very briefly, I'm grateful for the international audience, Polish audience, Kosovo audience. But in particular, I want to make a shout out to the audience in Bosnia who's watching and re-emphasize that you have very many friends in Kosovo. We see our plights as tied together, and we have great solidarity for Bosnia's accession as well to the EU and NATO. And this was one of the things that made us, I think, not only colleagues but friends. And so I just want to emphasize that, and I'm proud of that personally. And that's not only between us there; it's also happening in Warsaw and places around the world where the relationships are being formed. But for me, a great pleasure to be on your podcast, Jasmin. Just a quick word about you. You are extremely prolific, thoughtful, and collaborative in working on all the policy issues and the national issues that you're focused on. And I've always admired you for that. And I'm proud to, consider you a friend and a colleague and somebody who I've tried to do good and productive things for our countries and our region with.
Well, thank you very much, my friend. The feeling is very much mutual. And on that note, I think we're not going to top it, so let's just stop. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself. And thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you so much. Go Kosovo, go Bosnia.